members and communities. The purpose of our webinar is to help the Chamber members with their professional and business development. And each webinar is designed to be interactive and in most cases presented by a Chamber member who are experts in their field. We ask that you please turn your video on. We do like to see you if it's possible. This helps the presenter with their presentation, and it just helps all of us as well.
And you should have given
And
me the heads up.
if you can't put on your screen for whatever reason, no worries, but we do like to see you if possible. And it helps for networking. So please feel free to put your contact information in the chat box so people can reach out to you. And maybe if they see you at an upcoming chamber meeting, they can say, oh, you were on that webinar I attended last month. So put all that information in the chat, and we would love to learn more about you. So I'm just going to go ahead and pass it over to Betsy Moken so she can talk a little bit more about our speaker today. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. So I work with Cynthia and a group of other dynamic folks on our programs committee, which brings together events throughout the year and just a really nice added benefit of your membership. We are always looking for presenters. We don't normally do a segment in August, and Diane actually reached out to Karen and offered to do this training for us. So we're excited to see so many faces in August when we don't normally do a presentation. So I'm sure you've read this because you obviously signed up for the presentation because you were interested, but I'm just going to go ahead and read you Diane's bio. She is a consultant, keynote speaker, instructor, and leadership coach who has more than 20 years of experience researching, developing, and educating on the role of professional networking strategies in individual career development and overall business performance. She offers virtual, as she's doing today, and in-person speaking engagements, one-on-one leadership coaching, and strategic consulting tailored to meet the specific needs of each client in a variety of industries. She's worked with accountants, architects, law firms, higher education, and McGraw-Hill has published Diane's networking strategies in over 9 languages. Pretty amazing. We'd have to have a contest to guess what those 9 languages are, including her popular books, The Networking Survival Guide and Networking for Career Success. Her passion for networking and public speaking started at an early age when she attended 6 new schools before her senior year of high school. Her experience of learning to make new friends and connect with strangers has become a lifelong skill and one that she's now going to share with us today. She overcame her fear of public speaking by taking acting and stand-up comedy classes, sounds very interesting, which has contributed to her success and is now incorporated into her teachings, especially for introverts. Diane has traveled to all 7 continents and approximately 60 countries, enriching her understanding of human encounters and communication. So welcome, Diane, and thank you for reaching out to us and your willingness to meet with our members on a beautiful August morning. Thank you.
It is my pleasure. It's such a delight to be with all of you. I'll show some slides in a minute, but I'll just share with you. I just got back from Indianapolis and gave a presentation to the American Society of Association Executives. There is an association for absolutely everything, whether it was doctors or hospitals or gifted children, whatever else it was. It was wonderful. And I grew up in rural Indiana. And this is one of the things that I like bringing to New England, if you will, is kind of that small town, small community feeling. What I'm going to present today is a bit of an offshoot from networking, which is about delivering really, really top client services. And during COVID, I got certified by the American Hotel and Lodging Institute as a certified guest service professional. Because of all my hospitality experience, I'd been on the receiving end of often really great service. We've all experienced bad service. And so I'm going to kind of share with you some of the different strategies and things that we can do to really, really deliver wonderful top service. So I'm going to jump over to my slides. And what I think we'll do is I'll do the presentation. If you have questions, I'm going to ask Betsy and anybody else to kind of keep an eye on them in the chat, and then we can kind of do that. We'll go from there. All right. Okay, let me do the present. So it's one slide. All right. Thumbs up, people can see. All right, terrific. Okay, so thank you so much for having me participate in this. And I really, really want to help you think about just some ways that you can deliver top service and really be a support to your clients, your employees, your neighbors, your community, your fellow members of the chamber, and things like that. Quick, you heard a bio about me, extensive experience in hospitality. Published because of my moving, I have experienced so many different cultures. And of course, I had to put there at the bottom, a big fan of the Tartan Army. I think the Tartan Army gave us so much to smile about, actually inspired really top customer service this summer. I just really was. I live in downtown Boston. Everywhere I walked, there were men in kilts and sneakers, not a typical sight you see in downtown Boston. And I think one of the things that was really fun was to see people really smile and experience that. If anybody, this is one of the things I am most known for. It is this chart called How to Work a Room. People really do like it. I wanted to offer it there. If anybody wants to snap the QR code in the corner there, you're welcome to have it. I will also share it with the chamber. I'm not going to go through this today. This is a separate presentation, but it is one of the things that people often associate me with and how you kind of navigate events. So I just wanted to share that with all of you. All right. One of the first elements I want to talk about is authenticity. It's really important that you are yourself and you be real. When we show genuine interest in another person, they feel that, they experience that, they really know what that is like. And so, one of the things I just really encourage people to do is just think about what is something about you that is authentic. One word I'm often, people when they describe me is authentic, and I'm very proud of that. And I really think that people really they can feel when people are fake. Now, I will say that sometimes we don't feel like being helpful. We don't, when someone's snarky or someone's difficult or someone is, upset with us, it's hard to sometimes find the right words. And I think one of the things that I feel I really want to do is to have someone else feel heard. So one of the best ways to mitigate a difficult situation or show genuine interest in solving someone's problem, or we'll talk about this toward the end, being proactive in a way to kind of cement the relationship so people don't leave you. People stay with your organization because they do feel such a genuine connection to you. The next one is intuition. And I invite you to kind of think about ways that you can anticipate someone's needs. So one of the things when I find is that when you're getting off a plane, which I'm often doing, you're anticipating people pulling luggage down and trying to get off the plane. And sometimes that feels like the longest part of the flight is just getting off. And, there was a woman behind me who was very petite and quite senior. And so I really admired the gentleman who was across the aisle from her and said, "Would you like help with your bag pulling it down?" Because I think if she had tried, one, she'd be on her tipper toes, and two, it might fall and hurt more than just her. So, what are some things that you can anticipate for chambers? I encourage them to say, when people join a chamber, check in at 90 days after they've been a member. When their membership is coming up, give them a 90-day window and check in before their membership expires and say, hey, how are things going? Don't wait until 2 weeks before when they're looking at the bill and saying, do I want to spend this money or not? Noticing the little things, the small details. What's a customer, looking for to do? I was at a hotel I'm not going to name
I'm
because
actually on a
I don't
call,
want.
but it's just she's just talking.
Thank you. So one of the things, I was at a hotel not too long ago, and the bartenders were taking care of people. I was standing there and somebody else was standing there, and neither of us got acknowledged. if the bartender just simply said, I see you're there, let me finish this drink, I'll be right with you, I would have felt a little bit more connected to the hotel. As it was, somebody else came around and said, oh, they had a tray of water, which is really kind of all I wanted at the moment. So what are some things that you can see ahead of time to anticipate what somebody else is needing, and what's something that's going to make them think about, wow, this person is actually really, really proactive? All right. Empathy. So this is another one I really like. I feel empathic toward people. I like to listen to them. At times I feel like I want to write a book called Overheard, because sometimes I'm amazed about what I hear in different places that might not necessarily be a public environment for sharing things. But at the same point, I really encourage people to think about ways for you to be aware of what's going on. I will find it before we close down, but there's a really amazing video. I think it's from the Cleveland Clinic. And for a while, I was a baby cuddler at Mass General, and they asked us to watch this video before as a part of our training. And the idea was to have empathy, because you don't really know what is going on in anybody else's lives. I remember going for a walk the day after my mom passed away, and everybody I saw was like, everyone's going to experience this. How can, and I'm just a person on the street. And so part of it is we just don't ever know what's going on in somebody else's mind. And so sometimes it's important to maybe slow down a little bit. Say, sounds like you're having, a tough moment, a tough day. Is there something I can do to help you out? I was flying back from seeing my father, who was not well. I was at the airport in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I asked the woman sitting next to me, would you please watch my bag while I go get some water? When you're traveling alone, you just always are having so much going on. And she says, you hang on, and I'll get you the water. She came back, and the next thing I knew, we got talking, and 48 hours later, she had a connection at a hospital in Virginia to help my dad. So, part of a lot of things is just, are we kind of thinking about ways for us to be empathetic to other people? Champion people. This is something I really encourage us to do. Sorry, my cat is jumping up here. I encourage people to do with your employees, with your team members, with your community, with your guests, and with your customers and clients, and see a way for you to kind of see something from start to finish. At the hotel, there was something wrong in the bathroom. I told them when I was heading out that morning for my day of events. The next day, I got an email from the engineer at the hotel saying, is everything okay? I just really appreciated kind of the beginning to the end to see was everything okay? So is there a way for you to really champion people, sorry, and make them feel valued and supported as they're going through, this experience, whatever it might be. And, I just feel like these are some opportunities for us to really remove any barriers, obstacles, and do something like that. In the middle of COVID, my other neighbor is also in her 80s, and she said to me, do you know where the Star Market is in the neighborhood? And there's a new Star Market under North Station. And a lot of people don't even know there's a grocery store underneath North Station. And I said, yes, it's under North Station. She said, people keep telling me that, but I can't find it. And I said, well, let's walk over. And so I walked her literally to the door of the entrance, and she says, thank you, because I would have never found this, because it is kind of an odd entrance. So is there a way for you to really champion people and be sure that they get what they need and want? Just any questions, Betsy, that I should check in on right now, or can it wait?
No, we're doing great so far.
Okay. All right. It's always tricky when I see the count go up.
Yeah,
And as a
it's
good service person, I want to be sure.
they're all
And
it's still introducing each other. So that's where we're at the moment. Thank you, Diane.
absolutely love it. And I am going to invite people who, if you have a service issue that you would maybe want some sounding out, that we can be here for as your team to support and champion you. All right, Delight. Um, One of the things that I find really fun is when there's something unexpected that you really don't anticipate, you just don't really know is going to happen. I think it's the oh shoot, I should remember. It's I forget which the hotel chain, but when you get there, they offer you warm cookies. Like who doesn't love a warm chocolate chip cookie? When this conference I was at was 5,000 people coming to Indiana, all association professionals. And Indianapolis wanted to roll out the red carpet, and they did a brilliant job because these associations might pick Indianapolis as a future convention site. So, one of the things that happened was you got off the airplane, and before you were heading to baggage claim, there was a whole table, welcome to Indianapolis, and they had a bag. It was really, really hot. And obviously, if you've been watching the news, there's been a lot going on from the weather in Indiana of the floods. And there was a bottle of water. There was, some other little gifts for all of us who were coming in. Just a really, really nice personal touch, a great gesture. And it made all of us feel very valued and appreciated. And so I found just some of these smaller things are ways for people to do that. I'm getting ready to write my newsletter, which is going to go out tomorrow, and I'm going to talk about making a connection in 60 seconds or less. What is something really small that you can do? In the morning, my neighbor and I walk over to Mass General. We have a coffee. I walk to the gym. I do a quick row. And I now have this kind of fun little game where I say good morning to everybody on my walk back. I would say maybe if 20% say good morning back. A lot of people have their earbuds. They may not even hear it, but it just lets me feel good. And a lot of people are just kind of, surprised to have all of that. This one may sound obvious, but I think it's worth pointing out is deliver and do what you say you're going to do. I got an email this morning from someone said, I emailed you last week. I haven't heard from you. And she wasn't wrong. We had a conversation, and I thought she knew I was away. And obviously I wasn't clear. So I wanted to really own what I was doing, send her a quick note, said, I've got, a few minutes to jump on a presentation. I will email you in an hour. But I wanted to follow through and maintain the standards that I want to live by, and also own that there might have been a gap. So part of it is to think about what are some different ways that you can have that. Legal Seafood is known for delivering consistent, really good quality food. When I have people say, where should I eat in Boston? I love seafood. I send them to Legal because I know it's going to be consistently good. They will deliver a good meal, a good experience. Sometimes it's a little bit more hectic than others. There's one of my favorite Legal Seafoods, which is in Copley Place. It's way in the back. A lot of people don't even know that restaurant even exists. And it's a quieter place. I remember one time when I was there thinking this man looked really familiar. And then I realized, oh, yes, you're Seiji Ozawa, the conductor of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. And he was there with a whole group of people, I think board members, and it was a blizzard. And my hunch is that they were planning on going somewhere else. And it just, the weather, they were all in the hotel and they decided to stay in the complex. I overheard them say it was going to be 45 minutes for a table. I said to the person, I said, can I just see your manager for a quick minute? And they said, sure. I said to the manager, I'm not sure that is the conductor of the symphony with the board members. maybe you can find a table, less than 45 minutes. And they said, thank you so much. And so they appreciated it. I felt a little badly that somebody might have had to wait a little bit longer, for that to cut in. But I also knew that, there was that was just a thoughtful thing, for them to experience that. All right. Take the initiative. This is something that sometimes I'm surprised that people have to be told what to do. And so this is a little bit more also on the, being proactive, but you can think about it, but do you actually do it? And so it's seeing what you really want to be done without waiting for it to be done. I'm helping somebody find some staff members to, go out to the airport to greet some first class passengers. And we were writing up kind of the expectations. And it was like, if you need oversight, this is not a role for you. So empower people to take initiative. Let them know what is acceptable. Let them know what some different ways that they can solve a problem before it grows, before it festers. And think about that. I was at an event one time where they were going to have, it was at a law firm, and they were going to have a big meeting there. And they decided, which was a little awkward, but they decided to give the receptionist the day off because she was okay, and they didn't want to necessarily, complain about her, but they took the initiative to hire somebody who they felt was going to be a really good greeter, because that first impression really, really mattered. I encourage them afterwards to spend some time with their receptionist to be sure that person does make the first really good impression. But part of it is, what are some things that maybe are important for you to think about and do, to make the guest or the customer or the client feel really, really positive about that. And in some cases, taking that initiative to do something, really, really helps. All right. This is one of my favorites, I have to say, which is called Surprise and Delight. And this is when you go beyond the expectations to make a customer's experience memorable, and you have a chance to really kind of have that extra thoughtful, unexpected value, and experience, and it's a personal gesture. So this happened to me, and it was funny, the circumstances, because I walked into my hotel room in Chicago a number of years ago, and there was a dog bed and a menu and a bowl and a leash, and it was all set up with this really, really wonderful, elaborate, situation. And I thought, God, this is so great. Do they do this for every person in case they bring a dog? And then I thought, oh my gosh, it's in the wrong room. The dogs, someone's, asked to, it said they're going to bring their dog. So I had a little bit of fun with the front desk, and I said, my room is set up for a dog. Do you do this for every room? And they said, no, 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 no. And I said, okay. And pardon my language, but I said, I'm sure someone's called me a bitch before, but never the hotel desk. And so we had just a good chuckle, on that, because, a girl dog is named a bitch. And so part of it was we just had a good chuckle about that. And then they said, no, 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 we'll take it away. But, what are some different ways that you can surprise and delight? Some of you may or may not know how I started my business. I was helping airlines and hotels manage their lost and found inventory. And so one thing that we would do is research how many things were in lost and found, and having that opportunity to return it to somebody. Often people, when they lose things, they think they're never going to get it back. And so part of it is, what were some ways to do this? And the stories were really wonderful. Sadly, the business didn't make it because of September 11th, and it just wasn't feasible after that situation to have the business to move. It was in its, early stages. But, one security director said, finding the teddy bear and then seeing the flying child come through the lobby of the lobby to get their teddy bear back was just really, really a moment of surprise and delight. So, one of the things that I want to talk about now is kind of have a chance for you to share some challenges and some opportunities and some ways for us to think about, how you can deliver exceptional service. Um, I'm going to ask you a favor is that if you have any feedback for me, or, I'm going to give you a thing on how to remember names. If you can scan this QR code and give me any feedback back, I would be happy to send that to you. One thing that I think is if you can remember someone's name, and I am horrible at remembering names, which is why I came up with this list, is that I often find in many cases it's important for me to know how to do this. I've come up with some different things that work for me, and at the same moment, I find it can be a little bit challenging to do that. So I will take a look at, is there any questions, Betsy? And I've got some other thoughts that I can, but I would also really want to hear from other people who have some good stories, bad stories, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, we can jump right into the stories and the questions because there's nothing in the chat at the moment,
Okay.
Diane.
Okay. So anybody have a question? Is the baby cuddler a real job? It's a volunteer job. I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning. They asked you to do a commitment for a year. I did it at Mass General. It sounds a whole lot more glamorous than it is. I will tell you that. And because often what you're doing is you're doing other tasks to support the NIC unit. It's often in the NIC unit. And sometimes it's a bit humbling because these are often, not always, but I would say over half of the babies were drug babies. And they were also in a custody issue in some cases because there would be a mom who had had the baby. Surprisingly enough, in many cases, the father of the baby had not told his family that he had fathered a child, and the parents found out and they would want the child. So there would be a tug between the birth mother and who in many cases was choosing to give up the baby. And so yes, it was an interesting experience. Doubletree, yes, thank you, is the one that makes it. Oh, you work at the one in Westboro. So quick story about the Doubletree in Waltham. I have a friend who actually did this. Is that her kids were saying, "Oh, mom, you're the boring mom." And you never take us to Disney. And she said, we've been to Disney and there was this whole fiasco. And she said, listen, you go clean your room right now, and I'm taking you to Disney in an hour. Go clean your room, and we're going to fly to Disney. Actually, we're not going to fly. We're going to drive, but we can, well, I'll tell you more about that in the car. The kids go clean the room. The mom calls up the Doubletree in Waltham and says, I'm going to come in a half an hour with two kids wearing swimsuits. Will you please say welcome to Disney World? She did this for 2 years before the kids figured out they were in Waltham and not Disney World. And that was, talk about a surprise and a delight. And when she tells the story, it's just absolutely a fabulous, fabulous story. Yeah, those kids will never trust their mother again. That is for sure. That is for sure. Let me stop the screen share. And so any questions, challenges, experiences, let us help you. Some things that you have found with service that have been successful for you.
I have a
One
question.
quick story I'll share with you. The hotel, when I was doing Lost and Found, something the hotel chain told me, and they asked me not to share what chain, is that they sent flowers to the homes of people who had stayed there 5 times or more. Just saying thank you for your business. We appreciate it, only to get a call from somebody to say, I was not with my wife. And so the hotel learned not to send thank you notes to someone's home because there could be a different story. Yeah, it was a wow. You're right, Justin. I was just like, oh wow. And apparently it wasn't the first time this had happened. So the hotel learned to not necessarily send things to the homes. Any questions, challenges, successes that you would like to share?
I have a question and a comment.
Absolutely.
My question is, if some people believe in great customer service and others don't, or don't know how to practice it, for example, I don't think that it's a belief necessarily. Um, how do you infect others with the joy that you seem to walk around with? And I share in your practice of saying hello to everybody, particularly at stores, and I'll say, "How was your day?" And they'll say, "Okay." And then I'll say, "Just okay." And it turns out that there's a whole story behind every interaction and usually get it. And then your use of surprise and delight is what I have taught people about stewardship and fundraising. So I was surprised and delighted to see that slide.
Oh,
Thank you.
good. I'm glad. I'm glad. So remind me the first question you were asking. How do you create?
How do you, so I've developed a way of being, and how do I make sure everybody else ha kind of walks in with that attitude?
Yeah.
Uh,
Can you tell me a little bit more about your work or your community or?
Sure. I work at New England Botanic Garden at Tower Hill. So we are front-facing customer, people walking around here all day long. And we are 99%, rated, like everybody treats us really well when they come here. But occasionally we have customers that, present a challenge, and sometimes people handle it well and other times not so well, depending. And I'm just trying to figure out how we can be all on the same page consistently. Probably it's training, but that's one of the challenges. Or for
Yeah,
new people coming on board, how do you get them sort of in the ethos of the organization?
yeah, I think one thing to do, I worked for Overseas Adventure Travel for a while. What I loved was I never had to explain what the company did. you know and so part of what it is we had our mission and our values on the wall, and so it was clear when you went out to lunch and when you came back they were all there. I also think that I would perhaps invest in micro moments of 5-minute zooms if not everybody's in the same place, or and say, tell me about an experience you had today that went well, and then invite somebody to say, tell me about something that was tough, and see how we can all support you and challenge you, because it depletes the person who is a positive person when something is negative. It's, death by a thousand cuts. During COVID, I had a client and I was on their management team meetings. They were considered necessary personnel to be on site because they were the cleaning company, and I was dealing with the management, and they were having to oversee cleaners. And so part of it, what they were looking to do was to be anticipatory of somebody's needs. And one of the situations was that they had all these, milk deliveries for the coffee keep coming, and yet nobody was in the office. So at one point they said, would you like me to oversee to reduce that? And they shared that with other people who could then share that with their own locations to do something similar. So I think if you can share something that has worked well, also when you can, find words that other people can mimic. So one of my favorite phrases is tell me, followed by anything. Tell me what's going on with your day. Tell me, how it worked. Tell me, how what went well, what went wrong. There was an article in the Boston Globe at one point about Dana Farber, and they had raised $1 billion a year ahead of their goal during one of the recessions. And I'm like, there's a people story there. So I navigated my way and found an opportunity to speak to the CEO. And he raved about his board and things that they did. And one of his board members was very transparent about being treated for cancer there. And one day he saw her walking out and he said, "We have no bad doctors here." But she wasn't going to the rock star. And he was curious because if she had come to him and said, "Who should I meet?" he would have given her a specific or, a couple of people who were experts in her disease. And she, just navigated through whatever channels it was. And he said, "I'm just curious what you like about Dr. Jones." And he said she thought there for a minute and he said, "That's curious." And she said, "You know what? At the end of my appointment, he's the only doctor here who helps me put my coat on."
Mine hugs me at Dana-Farber when I
I
leave.
mean, he was like, "You mean I have to tell doctors to help a patient with their coat?" It didn't matter that, the rock star had a PhD from wherever and was best in molecular. That didn't even factor into her care. So part of it is what are some really, really simple ways that you can do it? I mean, I love it when I walk around in communities and there's dog bowls of water, on a hot day. It means the community cares about the puppies and the dogs, not just the customer, because they know someone is coming in with a wallet, maybe not without their dog, and is going to buy later on, and they're going to remember on a really, really hot day their dog had some water there. So, I think part of it is you being, or you or training, or whoever, Teresa, is being willing to invite people to participate and share what is on their mind. I did some work with MD Anderson Cancer Center in Texas, and there was a doctor there who had gotten their funding was a 2-year window, and at 6 months, she invited everybody to sit around a fire pit, gave them some wine. They were all chatting. And she said, "We're going to go around in a circle, and I want everybody to share what they think we should kind of do as this funding is winding down," because she didn't want anybody to feel like there were back stories and things like that happen. She also wanted to hear from the introverts. So if everybody was going around the circle, then everybody would have a chance to speak up. So I invite you to find ways to think about how can everybody talk, because it's often the louder people who you hear. It's often the people who are most vocal. They might be the most happy. They might be the most, you know, uh, um, difficult in many ways. And, I remember when I got feedback actually at Overseas Adventure Travel, and I will always be most appreciative to Stuart, who gave me the feedback and worked with me, because I was known as a difficult person. And I was hurt by that and confused by that. And I said, "Give me an example." And he said, "Well, you wanted to do the files this and this and this way." And I'm like, "Because it's better." And he said, "It's exhausting that you're always looking for something to be better. Sometimes it just needs to be good enough for us to get the work done in the time we have. And then later on, maybe we can come up with a different system." But part of it was my timing. Part of it was how I was saying, communicating it being better. Part of it was how it was being heard by other people. I was given a feedback in a social situation he said, "You interrupt a lot." And I'm like, "I do." And I didn't think of myself as an interrupter. And I mentioned it to the woman sitting next to me at OAT, and she said, "Yeah, you interrupt a lot." And I'm like, "Why didn't anybody give me this feedback?" You know? And so, yeah, done is sometimes better than perfect. Absolutely, Amy. And so one of the things I do when I do my in-person workshops about networking is we do handshake therapy, where we talk about the bad handshakes, the weak one, the strong one, the wet one, the one that, lingers or something like that. And I share that my father was teaching at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama, and we were having dinner one evening. And this general, admiral, whatever else, shook my hand. I was wearing a jade ring, and he actually cracked the ring. His handshake was that strong. And to this day, I think he thought he broke my knuckle, because it was a snap. It was a snap. And he said, "I didn't realize my handshake was that strong." I'm like, "Well, sir, maybe now you do." And my father was like, "Diane, stop," but I think I was all of 19. But part of it is that how many people were unkind to him and not said, you might want to lighten that up a little bit. It's one thing when you're shaking hands with Saddam Hussein, you want to say you're going to win the war, but not the rest of the population. So, I talk about, nice is important when you say to somebody, maybe you don't know you're interrupting. Maybe you don't know that your handshake is too strong. Maybe you don't know that, here's a better way to deal with somebody who is disgruntled. Um, and get invite people to speak up a little bit more.
Diane, lots of great comments in the chat, but one other question from Amy. Curious if you've been asked to support companies differently regarding customer service in the AI
Yeah,
era.
in the AI era, absolutely. So I think AI is fantastic. I use it a fair amount. I used it to give me some ideas for the slides. Then I take it from there and I say, here's kind of some of the different things that I want to say. Here's some different things I want to communicate, and all that sort of stuff. Thank you, Teresa. And so part of what I really feel in some cases is AI can be a tool. My phone is a tool, but sometimes you got to put it down. My car is a tool. It helps me get from A to B, but it's not the only thing that I find is useful. And so I think it's fine to I have an ongoing thread with AI right now that's been going on since April about when I'm feeling dispirited about running my own business. I live alone. I work alone. Sometimes and so AI has kind of become a thought partner in that, as a solopreneur. How do I stay spirited? Well, remember when you talked about it, it has a memory that is amazing. A couple months ago, you talked about this and this and this. How about you do this? Or you don't give yourself enough credit for what you do, to be proactive. So I think that is something that can be really helpful for all of us to to have it as a thought partner. Um, I find sometimes that the chat bots are actually better these days, and it helps me get to the right place. I do feel flattered when I call a Apple for support, and I've been through an AI thing, and at the end of it, they'll often say, "This has been a more fun call than I typically have." I say to the person, on the end of the phone, where do you happen to be calling, taking calls from today? And I will tell me, where you're taking calls from today. When I get into Ubers or Lyfts, tell me, is that something you do all the time? I'm amazed how many in the evening, how many Lyft drivers or Uber drivers are cops. And I'm often quite grateful for that. After the marathon bombing, a friend of mine wrote a post that was just very poignant about grabbing her. She was at the finish line and she grabbed one child in a stroller and another one in the pouch, and she ran from the finish line in Boston over to BU where she had an office. Called her husband and said, please meet me there. And I thought, if I saw this woman running with two children, I would say, get in my car. And a normal person would say, no, there's been a bomb. I'm not getting in these strange cars. So I decided to sign up to be an Uber driver on the off chance there would be an emergency in Boston. The following year was a blizzard after blizzard after blizzard, and my phone was popping up, can you drive today? So I thought, you know what, this would be an interesting thing to do. So I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning and did 3 hours of Uber in the morning. And it's like being a therapist on wheels. It really is. But part of it was, some people don't want to talk to you at all. Some people appreciated that. I went to Costco and got little mini waters, even in the wintertime, people appreciated, something like that. After the year was done, I didn't feel like I wanted to continue it, but I felt like I wanted to write a book called Undercover Uber. But it was pretty interesting, and the dating advice, the work advice, the conversations were pretty interesting for that time. Any challenges or good stories that people want to share?
Not a story, Diane, but I'd love to know like what your favorite go-to places are for certain things, whether it's a restaurant or a hotel, because, you know, we all pay attention to these things, but you're obviously more zoned into it. So like top vacation destination because the moment you get off the plane, they're treating you well. What resonates with you from years of focusing on this?
So in the introduction, I lived in Thailand for part
Mm.
of high school. My parents were specialists in Thai politics and culture.
Yeah.
They moved over there before us kids were born. My parents call this BC, before children. And so, and there's a phrase in that if you don't like Thailand, you don't like life. And so there's just a very, very genuine interest in hospitality. The Oriental Hotel there is the number one hotel in the world, has been for years. I love to freak people out in Boston when I say I went to I had my prom at the Oriental, and they're like, I think you're a little too old to go to prom, and the Oriental hasn't been there that long. And I'm like, no, it was the Oriental overseas. Um, they really have seamless service where you don't really even know you're being given good service. It's just really, really that thoughtful. I had a dinner one time where there were 12 of us at the dinner. I've never had a dinner like that since. And, all 12 of us got served. All 12 of us had the, cover taken off. It was somewhere in northern Germany. But, I think and I've also felt really, really gracious service, frankly, from other places that are, not posh. It doesn't have to be posh. It doesn't have to be at all. I find that some of that can be really, really very graciously done. I actually like when you can do the self-serve check-in these days with your baggage and things like that. It sometimes can make it easier, and I also like it when there's a person there who can see that you're being troubled. Um, I am a fan of JetBlue. I had the privilege recently of seeing the CEO of JetBlue speak at WBUR. There was a woman in the audience who was in a wheelchair. She is in a wheelchair because she was in a sledding accident. And she was a dentist who has completely basically lost her career because of the situation. And she commented about how few airplanes are capable of a wheelchair when you have to go to the bathroom. And it was just a question. What was so impressive was the CEO went down right away after the Q&A and talked to her specifically and said, I can't promise you that our planes are going to be, but she wanted to hear a little bit more. She wanted to connect. And the CEO of JetBlue used to be a litigator. I mean, that is not necessarily the persona you have for somebody who is going to be customer service oriented. I happened to see a post from her that when you land, and often there's JetBlue personnel, pilots who are flying home or whatever else it is, and they are asked to help to clean the plane, even if they're not on the crew. And so there was a picture of the CEO picking up the trash. And it was like even she does this after the plane lands. So I think there's just some really different ways for people to do that. But yeah, she was very conscientious of it, and I thought very, very uh, thoughtful. I'd love to hear customer service for B2B, often virtual, longer size sales cycle. Yeah, Amy, do you want to come off mute and say a little bit more and we can,
Hi, Diane.
hi,
Thanks for being with us this morning.
absolutely,
Um,
my pleasure.
so I'm one of these, social impactor, like former, educator, youth and workforce development people. The whole world thinks I'm nonprofit, but I actually have a for-profit business helping organizations, so whether they be employers or schools, set up and run great internship programs. And I end up giving away a ton of time. I love people. I sometimes sort of forget to ask for the sale or, like to lock it down. I'm just sort of like giving and enjoying the conversations. And I really need to like tighten that up, knowing that I am in a for-profit business like most of us. So I'm just sort of, you know, I think I have a good intuition when it comes to customer service, and I always put people above profit, and the profit will come. But I don't know. I'm just sort of wondering if you have any thoughts for those of us that are super people oriented, that kind of just need to get the sale, like lock it in and keep going. So that's more of what I'm working on, without people feeling like you're rushing to the sale, which is not my nature. But any thoughts?
Yeah, we're sisters, Amy, on this because, I can't tell you, can I pick your brain? Can you network with somebody who's, unemployed? I'm like, when you're unemployed is not the time to be networking, but we'll pick up the pieces from, the broken vase on that. I think one thing that I try to do is to say, let me give you 20 minutes off the clock.
Mm-hmm.
And then say to them, after that, I go on the clock. I rarely bill hourly. Having said that, I say to people, if that works for you, I can do that. And here's my hourly rate, to kind of be a sounding board for you. And that kind of helps tighten up that. It also may mean, Amy, this is an opportunity for you to come up with a new product, where you do offer, um, you know, um, office hours or, pick my brain time or some things like that. And so I think part of what you might want to do this might be a product offering for you. As some of you may or may not know, during COVID, I worked for the SBA, the Small Business Administration. And so I was tasked with doing outreach to be sure people knew about the SBA loans. What a lot of people don't know is that SBA, I don't know if they still do or not because of the funding situation, funds SCORE, and funds the Center for Women in Enterprise. There's a veterans group. And so I encourage people to have a SCORE mentor, as a sounding board for you. And we would jokingly say that SCORE mentors are like shoes. If one pair doesn't fit, try a different SCORE mentor. There's one person I know, she's got 3 SCORE mentors. She's got one for sales. She's got one for, her people challenges. And she's gotten one, I think, for technology. I forget anyhow. But I would really encourage you to kind of maybe explore some things like that. But it sounds like to me, Amy, there's a product. If people are asking you something, there's an opportunity for them to pay you for that. Yeah.
Diane, another question that's popped up from Cynthia. Difficult conversations crop up personally and professionally. Can you share more about what strategies and phrases you have found helpful to use to help de-escalate a difficult conversation?
Yeah. I recently had to let somebody go. It was we had agreed to work for 3 months. And I was bad and I let it slip. I let it slip. And I thought, I had hoped by 3 months, she would cover her costs. She was going to be doing some sales calls, and helping me get some business. I let it slip to 6 months. We had some things that were looking promising, and then after a while, she wasn't covering her costs. So, I had said to her in some, and she's in Oman. She's, so we had never met. And so and we were not going to be meeting. We're not going to be able to do this face to face. And so, but up until then, we had been having some conversations. So if you have a difficult conversation, I encourage people for that conversation shouldn't be a surprise. So there's a difference between a difficult conversation and one that comes out of the blue. I've been fired. I've had to fire. I know that kind of is a really difficult conversation. Sometimes that it's with a vendor, but in many cases it's with staff. So if the person who asked the question wants to make some clarity on if this was a staff thing or not, let me know. But one thing I really want to, emphasize is that, if the person can have some sense of, some things haven't been working for a while, or, every time, McDonald's, the fries are cold, I mean, whatever it might be, it shouldn't be a surprise. And so I think it's important to kind of lay that groundwork. So, I think the person is gone who asked about, creating that environment. But, here, I want to establish that we are a respectful environment, that there's no yelling or, whatever else it was. I remember when I had my office in a law firm, and I was blown away at the yelling. I had not experienced that as a work environment. I hadn't experienced that as a home environment. I feel very fortunate on that. My dad had a temper, but it wasn't something that, it was consistently yelling. And so part of it is I think it's some things to really make it a situation where you can say, we don't want swearing in the office, or, I want to keep this a profanity free environment. And so making clear what that is, and when there is a deviation, I invite you to pull that person aside and say, I was a little surprised that to be in this situation. I really would prefer that no one experiences that again. I remember being in a situation where I was staying in New York with my mentor, and she went through the suggestion box, and one of the suggestions was, please no yelling in the office. And I said, who was yelling? And she said, me. And I was shocked because I could never have imagined my mentor yelling in general. And we had a very thoughtful conversation about, like, I would be very uncomfortable working for you if you yelled at me. So, I think it is important to kind of have some expectations for that. I know we're at the hour, so I want to be respectful of your time. I am happy to hang out if there's more questions, but I do want to be respectful of people's
Well,
time.
and Cynthia was the one who asked that question, so she commented great advice, and she's actually the one who's going to close us out today. So that worked out perfectly.
Okay, great. So I want to thank you so much, Diane, for this presentation this morning. It was super interesting. I think we all can walk away with lots of great takeaways. In the next day or two, you will be receiving a survey as well as the recording. So anyone who registers for the webinars, even if you don't show up, you do receive the recording, which is great. But we do ask you, if you don't mind, to fill that survey out for us. It just helps the programs committee to better identify upcoming webinar topics and your needs and interests. So our next webinar is going to be on, let's see, give me a second here. It's on Thursday, September 10th. And the presenter happens to be in the audience now. It's Anna Welland. And the topic is the people problems costing your small business time, money, and momentum. So hopefully you will join that. And we have lots of ribbon cuttings happening in August. So I hope to see some of you there. And thank you so much for attending today.
And if you have a moment and you did that, you took the